Have you ever wondered, how do you customize your gluten-free flour to make different types of baked goods?
And today on WTF, we're going to show you how to make your gluten-free flour work for you by showing you how to make bagels and pizza. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Guerin.
And I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. And here on WTF, every week we cover unique ingredients, techniques, do recipes and demos. So remember, ring the bell and subscribe because you'll get notified of our content. It does come out every single Tuesday. And this week we're going to be doing more of a deep dive into gluten-free baking. Specifically, once you have a gluten-free flour, what do you add to it in order to make a different variety of goods? Because, you know, when you go to the store and you buy a pre-made mix, that's not really a one-size-fits-all, and if you try to use it like that, you're not going to get the best results. So Scott, maybe where we should start with is, we have our I'm Free gluten-free line. Maybe we should start a little bit about, our flour, which forms the base of kind of, our particular mixes, and then how do you alter them to make different things?
Sure, so there's a few different things with bases that you would buy in a grocery store, right? So those, once you get that, that's all you get. You can't really mess with it, you can't alter it, because they generally have xanthan gum in it. People think that xanthan gum is the best for all gluten-free baking. A blanket, this is the best, but it's really not. Xanthan gum has a sliminess to it that just doesn't necessarily work with gluten-free baking because bread isn't slimy. So our gluten-free flour doesn't have the grittiness, doesn't have that slimy because it doesn't have xanthan gum, and it also doesn't have the kind of beany flavor that you would get from some of the ones that use different types of bean flours. So it's very neutral, and you can really build upon it to make a great gluten-free bread.
Yeah, and so within our mix, I believe it's rice flour and tapioca flour. So if you're wondering, like, what's in here, that's what it is. And two of the things that we commonly use with this particular blend is the I'm Free Gluten Replacement, as well as the I'm Free Perfect Baking Powder. Now, what exactly do those two things do in order to enhance this mix?
Sure. So whenever you're having any gluten-free bread, the I'm Free Perfect Gluten Replacement is great for that because it can replace any xanthan gum that would be in any recipe. So if you have a recipe that calls for a certain gluten-free flour and you don't want to use it, or it calls for xanthan gum, you can absolutely just implement this in its place, 1-to-1 ratio. And when we're adding it to our gluten-free flour, it's going to give it that lift, that kind of gluten replaced texture. So in gluten and bread holds on to those air pockets, and it allows it to be nice, light, and airy while also being solid. So when you're adding the gluten replacement, that's exactly what that's doing. Then when we go into the perfect baking powder works really well as it's a late acting baking powder. So generally baking powder starts to act the second you put it into the oven, and the rise is done within minutes. This, as it heats up, it activates later in the baking process, so it needs to reach a certain temperature before it starts to activate, and that late rise is what's going to give your gluten-free doughs, which are generally dense. They're like bricks that you can make a house with. It's going to give it that extra little bit of lift to make it nice and airy.
Yeah. And if you go onto our blog, it's blog.modernistpantry.com. We already have quite a few different gluten-free baked goods and bread recipes on there, so you can access that there. And because we've already done that, today we felt like we were going to do something a little bit different with the gluten-free doughs. Do you want to talk about what you ended up making, Scott?
Sure. So we found kind of like a really great hack to, just constantly everyone's trying to improve their gluten-free breads and doughs. So we have these three, which are really great, but then we found something else that we can add to allow us to form and shape doughs like never before. We found this trick, doing our research, we found it in Modernist bread, and it's actually adding in a milk protein and adding in transglutaminase, which is also commonly known as meat glue. It's not made from meat, but it's commonly known as meat glue because it bonds certain proteins, and those proteins are found in a milk protein called sodium caseinate.
Okay.
So when we add those two ingredients to it, it really kind of mops up that extra moisture because gluten-free doughs require a lot of moisture. You have to add a lot of moisture because you're working with rice flour and tapioca flour, and those take a lot. And if you only add the normal amount that you would add for wheat flour, it's going to make an extremely dense dough. So you're going to have to add a lot extra moisture, and this meat glue and sodium caseinate, there's a lot of big words, it acts in mopping up that extra moisture, holding it together so you can roll out dough, which commonly isn't a thing that you can do with gluten-free bread. You can shape it into a bagel. You can do all these things that you really couldn't do before this trick.
Okay, great.
So we're actually going to show you now. And now this dough is the pizza dough that we're going to make.
Ooh.
And the pizza will show up here eventually. Don't worry, you will see it. So I'm going to start with our gluten-free.
It'd be a tease where it is like no pizza for
no
you.
Pizza,
no
not
pizza.
even in the picture. Right, so this is our gluten-free flour.
Okay.
And as you can see, it looks like normal flour. So I'm going to add that in here. Right. And then we have our sodium caseinate. Sodium caseinate is the milk protein. We have salt, because all breads need salt. We have our meat glue.
And we have an episode all about meat glue, so
Yes.
link in the description below to find out more about it. But this one, which one was this? TI?
This is TI.
Okay.
So this has the highest amount of transglutaminase enzyme content to it. So it's really going to act really fast with the sodium caseinate. Then we have our gluten replacement, which is very important. Without that gluten replacement, we're not going to get the right texture to the dough, and we're not going to get that correct rise.
Okay.
Then we have our baking powder. Then we have yeast. So yeast, just like normal bread dough. But as you can see, I'm just putting everything in together. This is really easy. And then we have, so we're making pizza dough. And generally, on the bottom, you get that kind of crispy little bits of semolina or cornmeal on the bottom. So we're actually adding it directly into our dough here. And that's also going to help retain some of that moisture during the cooking, since we cook at such a high temperature for this.
Okay.
Right? And I'm just going to give this a mix very quickly, just to kind of incorporate everything into one flour mixture. And as that's going, I'm just going to add in my oil, and bump this down, and then water goes right in. And this is about a 75% hydration dough, so 75% of the weight of 75% of the weight of the total weight of the flour, right? So that's how much water we're adding, and you can see it's a very wet dough. It comes together very easily, right? So very simple. I'm just going to mix this until it's all mixed up. We don't have to worry about mixing for a long time to get that gluten development, because there's no gluten in this flour.
Right.
So I'm done. At this point, once I mix everything together, I am done. But as you can see, I can't really roll out this mixture, right? But in a few minutes, you'll be able to see, I will be able to...
Now I'll just move this right here for now?
Yep, you can move it right there for now. I will be able to roll out, or at least lift up, that mixture, right? So good. But we're not just going to stand here and talk about nothing. So
All right.
I actually have some that has been set.
Ooh, nice.
So this is some of our dough that is made. And you'll see in just a moment, that goes from a very liquidy dough to where I can pick it up. So I'm just going to dust this area here. So just like I'm making traditional pizza, I'm going to have...
Are you using rice flour there, or does
This
it matter?
is actually our gluten-free flour. So
Okay,
the same
perfect.
thing that we're using to make the dough with, we're using as our, just our dusting. So just like you would a traditional pizza dough, I'm just going to, I'm going to roll this out.
And it is something that if you didn't add the TI and you didn't add the sodium caseinate, you would not be able to do this.
You would not be able to do it because it would be too wet. Even no matter what amount of flour you put down, eventually it's just going to mix in and make it too tough or anything like that. But here, I'm able to manipulate my dough into the shape I need it to be.
Yeah.
Right? And if you find any cracks in the corners, that's really typical with gluten-free bread. You can easily just bring it back in to make that dough shape.
Yeah.
Right?
And I can kind of like almost anticipate the question that's going to come in is, if I want to make it plant-based, can I remove the sodium caseinate and will it still work?
So that's the difficult part, is sodium caseinate contains the two proteins that that work with transglutaminase. That's not to say that those two proteins, which are glutamine and lysine, can't be found in nature. Now, it's difficult to find, okay, maybe if I use soy, I can get one of those proteins, but you're going to have to find those two proteins. But you should be able to do it if you find those two proteins within plants. You just have to do the research of finding those two.
We haven't done it, but if you've done it or you do it, please let us know what you find out.
And that's one of the things is I can lift up this bread dough, right? And I don't have to worry about it falling down. So now what I do is I just par bake this. I would par bake this off, and then I would take it out and I would dress it just like a normal pizza, and I would bake it right in again. I don't have to worry about putting this on parchment paper. I don't have to worry about putting this, on a special pan or a sill pad or anything like that. I bake this on the bottom of my combi oven. So, just get it as hot as you possibly can. This can be baked in a wood fire oven. It can be baked in anything. As long as you dust it with the correct amount of flour, you're going to be able to lift it up and work with it, which is not common. And then here's the finished product. So it looks like a pizza. Janie, if you want,
it is a pizza.
Right?
Ooh.
There you go.
There we go. Yay.
See, it pulls off, it folds. And one of the best things about adding the sodium caseinate and the transglutaminase is that it gives it a bit of chew.
I was just about to say that. A
lot of the times gluten-free bread looks like it, you take a bite, and it falls apart. If it becomes very crumbly, it gets that grittiness that we talked about earlier. But this one has a nice chew. It really holds it together, and it's crispy on the bottom. And it's just really amazing. When we found this kind of hack, we were blown away by it. So
it's super good.
We wanted to see what else we could do.
All right. What else can we do?
So we made bagels, right? And one of the things that they made in the Modernist bread was really amazing. We saw these bagels that they made. And it was mind-blowing that they were actually able to do it. So we took it and we kind of played with the idea, and we made our own ratios for it. We came up with a bagel that looks like a bagel, is crispy on the outside, chewy on the inside. Once again, chewy, not something you get with gluten-free bread commonly. So we actually made a nice gluten-free bagel. If you wanted to take a bite, I don't know if you want the salmon, the cream cheese, and
I'm just going to go for just the bagel.
Go right for it. That's just toasted. So just as you would like a normal chewy bagel.
Yeah.
So we have all these really great things, and you could take the I'm-free gluten-free flour, you add in the gluten replacement and the baking powder, and then you go about like a recipe as normal, you can end up with really great gluten-free bread that really wasn't possible a long time ago.
Yeah, and as always, you can get all these recipes on our blog. Links are in the description below, as well as we have a video coming out in a couple of days about making the bagel. So if you're like, I really am interested in seeing how this process is done, just stay tuned, I guess.
And one last thing, I just want to show
this back.
how quickly this works. Obviously, you would have to give this some time for the yeast to really develop and start growing. But if you can see, I'm going to put a little bit of flour in my hands. So I'm able to lift up this dough and roll it into a ball.
Right. Yeah, so that didn't take very long at all.
Yeah, it is set. And it's not falling apart, it's not wet, it is a ball. And that's really amazing, something that, like I said, is not something you find with gluten-free breads. And I've worked a lot with them. And when we found this trick, we were blown away. So
yeah, that's
we really want people to try it too at home.
Yeah, so kind of, if you're wondering what should I pick up in order to get started or improve upon your gluten-free baking, give these items a shot. This is the gluten-free flour, gluten replacement, as well as the perfect baking powder. So these are kind of like 3 must-haves in our kitchen for any type of gluten-free baking. So we always work with them. So yeah, and of course, as always, if you have any comments, you have any questions, leave them in that comment section below. We will get back to you. And from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Scott Garrett. Thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell so you get notified when we drop a new video.
To get today's recipes and all of our recipes, remember to go to blog.modernistpantry.com, where you get recipes, Ask a Chefs, tips and tricks, and more.
And if you haven't already, tell a friend so they know what's going on here at WTF.
And as always, to get any of the ingredients you saw today, you can go to modernistpantry.com to shop.
And until next time, we'll be here in the test kitchen helping you create memorable and magical experiences.